Today we're making ramen. Actually, I already made it, but I couldn't use the actual beginning of this video as the intro because I started this at 4 a.m. And you wanna see what that looked like? Yeah, that guy over there, that's me. I'm sleep deprived and holding 2 pig feet in the middle of my kitchen. Today's gonna be a weird day.
In my last video, I took you with me to Fukuoka, Japan, the birthplace of tonkotsu ramen. While we were there, we ate a ton of ramen, and I also promised myself that I'd make tonkotsu ramen at home when I got back. That includes the chashu, the marinated eggs, the dashi, and of course, the broth. And it wouldn't be a Chef Tyler cooking video if I didn't also make grilled cheese, so I'll be showing you how to make a chashu grilled cheese to accompany your ramen.
Now, I've never actually done this before, but hopefully we're gonna be able to figure it out together, or we're gonna learn what not to do. Either way, we're definitely gonna learn something today, that's for sure.
All right, we're gonna get right into this recipe, but before we do that, pause the video and go get a snack. I'm not joking, you're gonna need a snack, you need to be near food. So go ahead, pause the video, come back once you got food. All right, we're good, right? You got food? You ready to keep watching the video? All right, let's do this. Now that you have food in hand, it's time for me to show you my feet. Aside from the fact that they're going to allow me to make foot jokes for the rest of this video, I'm using pig feet because they have a lot of fat and collagen in them, which is going to make our broth super white and super delicious. The other thing I'm using here is pork rib bones on the left side of the screen, and typically you would use an 80-20 ratio of pig bones to pig feet, but I was actually not able to find like hardly any pig bones, so I ended up using 2.5 pounds of pork bones and 3.5 pounds of pig feet, which is obviously not an 80-20 ratio, so we're deviating pretty heavily from a traditional recipe already, and it's literally the first step, but I'm not worried. Oh, and I just realized I haven't explained why I was doing this at 4 a.m. yet. So this is going to take 14 hours. Yeah, it's not a quick process. It is going to be a pretty passive process though, so you can go to bed for a few hours once you get this started, but the first thing you're going to need to do is boil it for about 15 minutes to extract all the scum from the meat. You'll see all this foam rising to the surface, and then you can literally just dump everything out completely, all of the liquid, everything. Obviously save the bones and the feet, and you're going to want to really rinse the feet. Make sure you scrub in between the toes. Do a better job than you would do when you wash your own feet, because I know a lot of you actually don't wash your feet when you shower, which is kind of nasty, but I've learned that recently that a lot of people don't do that. You guys need to wash your feet when you shower. But seriously, when you rinse the bones, make sure you really scrub them down and get any scum that's sticking to the surface off of them. Clean your pot too, and this time I'm filling it back up with 5 liters of clean water and then adding the bones and feet back in. Now, if you've ever made any broth or stock before, then you know that you usually don't want to bring the broth to a rolling boil because it makes the soup cloudy. But for tonkotsu ramen, you actually need to bring it to a rolling boil. That's the whole reason that tonkotsu ramen looks so creamy. It's because all of the pork fat gets emulsified into the broth, which makes it creamy and white. This is going to take a while though, so make sure you set a timer for 13 hours and keep an eye on the pot. Make sure it doesn't run too low on water. You can add water if you need to. Make sure it's covering all the bones. And just a heads up that once that 13-hour timer is done, the broth will still not be finished. We're going to cook it for 1 more hour with some aromatics, but I'll explain that later in the video. Okay, so now that that's on autopilot for a bit, feel free to go back to bed for a few hours or go wash your feet after I gave you that lecture. But at some point during these 13 hours, there's a few things that we're going to need to do to kind of prep stuff for our final ramen. The task that's going to take the longest is making the chashu, so you're probably going to want to make that the next thing you work on. Chashu is the braised pork belly that ramen is commonly topped with, and this stuff is incredibly tasty when done well. I hope we do it well. No, I'm just kidding. This is going to turn out because it's pork belly, and it's pretty hard to mess up pork belly. It's just delicious as long as you cook it. I was only able to find this giant 12-pound slab of pork belly, but it's a lot more than we need for this video, so I trimmed it down to about 4 pounds. I'm also removing the skin because if we didn't do that, it would be a lot chewier than the rest of the pork belly, and we don't want that. You can save this pork skin to make something really cool with it, like a football or something. I don't know what you would do with this. But once the skin is removed, the next step is to roll it up tightly and tie it into this pork belly log. This rolling step technically isn't necessary, but if you want the classic round chashu pieces, you're going to have to do this. And don't worry, if you don't roll it, the recipe will turn out exactly the same. You can just use the slab instead of the roll and follow the rest of the directions. Most of this cooking process is going to happen in a 275-degree oven, but before we do that, we need to combine 1.5 cups of sake, 1 cup of mirin, 3/4 cup of soy sauce, and 3/4 of a cup of sugar in a pot or Dutch oven and bring it to a boil. While that is heating up, split 1 shallot in half, cut about 2 inches of ginger into slices, peel 9 cloves of garlic, and chop 6 scallions into thirds. Don't you dare cut those into fourths, it's going to ruin the recipe. Add all of these aromatics to the pot with the pork belly, and we're ready to put this into the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for about 4 to 5 hours. Since the pork isn't completely submerged in liquid, we are going to want to rotate it every hour or so make sure you set a reminder to do this. I let mine go for a total of 4.5 hours and it was fantastic. After cooking in the oven, remove the chashu from the broth and place it in a container to cool in the fridge. The reason you want to let the meat cool down before you slice it is that the cooling process actually firms the meat up a bit so that when you slice it, it doesn't just completely fall apart into a pile of pork lump. You'll actually get like nice pork slice rings. And make sure you don't throw out the broth that we cooked this in because you can use that to marinate your eggs later on. And by later on, I mean now. That's the next thing we're going to do. I'm going to teach you how to make those delicious ramen marinated eggs. I'm making 6 soft-boiled eggs. You can make more or less eggs depending on how much you can afford because eggs are like way too expensive right now. But once you've acquired some eggs and probably some new debt, you're going to want to boil the eggs for 6.5 minutes and then place them into ice water to stop the cooking. An egg peeling tip that not a lot of people know is that you can use a spoon to remove the shell and it's way quicker and it also just typically comes out way cleaner. You're not going to like pick apart pieces of the egg white. Then once all the eggs are peeled, you can add them into a small container and pour over the pork chashu broth. Another tip here is that if you lay a paper towel over the eggs, it's actually going to wick up the marinade, making sure that the eggs are completely coated in it. Then once you've done that, place these in your fridge for about 4 to 5 hours and they're going to be ready to go. The broth is still boiling, we've got the chashu, we've got the eggs, and there's just one more component that we need to make before we have everything we need to make our ramen. This is tare, and you might have noticed that the broth we've made so far is completely unseasoned, and that's because it is. In Japan, it's actually pretty common for ramen broths to be relatively unseasoned until the last moment they're served when the tare is added. So if it's not already clear from the ingredients we're putting in the tare, this is going to be the source of our saltiness and sweetness in the broth. It's got a really strong flavor, and you definitely would not want to drink a cup of this on its own, but you put a little bit of it in your soup and it's going to set you right. So with everything prepped, all that was left for us was to continue boiling the broth until we hit the 13-hour mark. This is when we remove the lid from the broth, add in half a green cabbage, half of an onion, and 8 large cloves of garlic. We're going to boil this for 1 more hour and this time leave it uncovered. Once this is done, we're going to strain the broth and it's finally time to eat. To assemble your bowl of ramen, add 2 tablespoons of tare to whatever bowl you're going to use. And don't forget, you can always add more of this, so if you want to make your soup saltier once you try it, feel free to add more. Then you're going to want to ladle in some of your 14-hour pork broth, add in some cooked noodles, cut your marinated egg in half to reveal that beautiful soft-boiled center, add in some chopped green onion, and finally some sliced chashu. But I did skip a step there because before you add the chashu, you're probably going to need to heat it up in a pan since we did finish this like 6 hours before the broth was done. And you can simply just heat this up in a warm pan for a couple minutes, but if you want to make this a little bit better, you can actually add some of the chashu broth from earlier. If you remember, this broth had sugar in it, so it's going to caramelize in the pan quickly and it just perfects the chashu. I mean, look at this. That's beautiful. Now, if you're a normal person, that's the end of the recipe. You can just shovel this into your face and you're good. And look, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out considering this is my first time ever making ramen like this, and it's definitely not going to be my last. I do think next time I'm probably going to experiment with the tare a bit more and see what sort of flavors I can infuse in there, but if you make this recipe, I promise you're going to be happy with it. But I did say that the recipe was over only if you're a normal person. If you're 50% grilled cheese sandwich like me, you know we got to throw some of this chashu on a grilled cheese sandwich. So for this sandwich, I decided to use sourdough like I usually do, and I'm toasting the inside of the bread using some olive oil. I'm also obviously going to need some chashu for the chashu grilled cheese, so I sliced some of that up, and once the bread was done toasting, I threw the chashu into the pan. Well, I guess I didn't throw it, I kind of just nicely placed it. Then I added some mayo to both pieces of bread, and the cheese we're using on this sandwich is actually some of my homemade American cheese. I've got a different video for that. If you want that, I'm going to link it below. It's a really mild, creamy, just general cheese that I think works great on grilled cheese sandwiches. Then I added some of the chashu, and I was realizing that basically all the flavors we have on here are pretty much just like fat flavors. So I decided to add some togarashi, which is a Japanese rice seasoning, and it's got some like chili flakes and sesame seeds and lots of good stuff in it. Then that was pretty much it. I closed up the sandwich, toasted it in a pan, and sliced it open. The cheese pull was pretty good because I did add some Munster cheese right before I closed the sandwich. I guess I didn't say that, but I did that. That's why the cheese pull was good. And I was pretty excited to try this sandwich. The first bite was honestly just decent. I wouldn't say it was great. It definitely needed some spice, which is why I decided to add some chipotle hot sauce, and this was a huge improvement. The smokiness and spiciness helped cut through some of that fat and balance the sandwich out, and overall I ended up giving this an 8 out of 10. Okay, that's the end of the video.